hope everybody's doing good. I want to start this talk out by offering an apology to everybody. So this is going to be, at least the first part, more of a heart-to-heart. You see, I truly wish that I could focus more on what we can do to solve our problems than having to point them out and then offer solutions all the time, because I think that that's something that is tough for some of the folks to deal with, and I know it can be disheartening for some of them. So, you know, when we're talking about problems in our society, you have to understand, well, I ask you to understand that the problems that we have in our society affect everybody. They have a negative impact on everyone. Some may not realize how much that's the case until later in their lives. And some have more an immediate impact, right? So, I think part of my frustration, which I apologize for and ask for your forgiveness for, is that I'm a doer, right? I like to get stuff done. And I like to try to get people to work together to do things. And we have created a situation in society where people are so divided, so risk averse, so broken, so fearful, so confused, that it's very difficult to do that. And admittedly, I mean, I get frustrated because of that as much as anybody. Because I see how not addressing our problems rightly as they are compounding that problem, amplifying it, and creating more conditions for the same thing. Now, it's true. At times, there's a time for tough love, and we are in it. But it doesn't mean that we have to be abusive on either side to one another. That's part of the problem. Now, there's some things going on in our society that are so abhorrent that you have to call it what it is, and you have to actually be willing to be brutally honest about it. But even in that, there's a way of approaching it. And admittedly also, I've looked at trying to try every kind of means available, including engaging my old method acting days to try to, in a sense, channel how others feel and put that front and center, so you get a visceral, emotive forcing effect, if you will. That doesn't work very well with most people. It does with some. But our whole society is driven for the hyperbolic, but still it doesn't achieve what it is that I think is going to actually get us where we need to be. And where we need to be is we need to work together to solve our problems. And I'm not just talking to the people at the top or the people at the bottom. I'm talking to everyone. Because if we're going to truly ever emerge from this time period something better, we've all got to acknowledge, both with ourselves and to one another, that we all make mistakes. We all have a tendency for fallibility and corruptibility. We all have areas of our lives that we wish we were better at, or we could overcome and do, have more victory in, things that we struggle with. When we fail to see one another as people and merely as screens for us to project our own frustrations, anger, hatred, our own stuff upon, that does not profit anyone doing it, nor the people that it's being done to. It's one thing to expose things that are destructive to society and to people. It's another thing to then turn around and beat the hell out of them with it. That's why I talk so often about grace. Not cheap grace. Not grace that excuses licentiousness in our own lives or in our society, but authentic grace. Because if we're going to overcome the problems we have as a nation, and collectively, right, as a people, and individually, again, it's something I say all the time, it's going to have to be in a spirit of truth and love, so that authentic justice and mercy can come about from humble and contrite hearts. And that starts with each one of us. And we live in such a time where everybody's buttons are being pushed. And there's, I've described why that is, talked about why that is for a long time. So I'm not going to dive into that in any kind of deep way tonight. But you see, even with leaders, you have to understand leaders are people just like anybody else. They make mistakes. They have fears. They're susceptible to confusion, making bad decisions, just like anybody else. And though the impacts are oftentimes more immediate, more intense, and it has a more immediate triggering of cascades that affect more people, they still are human beings just like anyone else. It's why it's dangerous to put people in leadership on pedestals, or anybody in the public eye on pedestals. There's a reason why so many people in the public eye fall. Because the public projects onto them, and then they project back on the public, and it's this cycle, this feedback loop that fuels both. But when it comes down to it, I know that we're in a very dark time. I know that it's a very confusing time. And I know there's a lot of uncertainty. And in such times, we need authenticity, honesty, openness, and a willingness to reach out to one another and try to meet people where we're at, to treat them as we'd like to be treated even more, even though it's the most difficult times to do that. Yet by not doing that, what we do is we actually prolong crisis. We prolong the crisis and the suffering and the confusion and the fear and all the things that amplify it, as well as the complexity of addressing it. And that's why I bring these things up. Look, I'd be a liar if I told you that it's a tough time for me too. If I didn't tell you that, I'd be a liar. In a sense, I feel like I'm constantly in a state of mourning. And I have my moments of perplexity, not knowing what to do. I feel the stress, the frustrations, and the anger, and I feel the same stuff as everybody else. I'm by no means impervious to those things, and what I try to do is I try to use it to understand myself and others, and grow in sensitivity and empathy towards others. I try to be aware of where I'm at with these things, so I don't project them on others. And so that's part of the crisis that we're dealing with right now. Coming out of a long duration crisis, the psychosocial impacts of that are heavy. So, being aware of how that impacts people, how it impacts society in general, decision making, right? All those things, everything that makes up society. It's important. It's important to try to understand, right? Because you can't build bridges for restoration and reconciliation without the bridge being constructed with a willingness to understand others. And understand yourself makes that possible. Being willing to take a look at you on a regular basis and be real with you, and be real with God about where you're at with things. We all need God's grace, and we all need forgiveness, and we all need to forgive. And one of the things that I do every day is before I call it a day and go to sleep, I spend time in prayer, and I always ask God to forgive any offenses, anything that has been done towards me, to not let it be held against anyone. And then I ask for forgiveness for the areas and the things that I've done knowingly and unknowingly in that day that didn't live up to what honors God and honors what I say I believe, and looks at creation in truth and love, and in the action of justice and mercy. So I tell you these things just to be honest, right? That it's a struggle. I get it. I struggle as well. And a lot of people do. Most people do on a daily basis. So when it comes to problem solving, to be able to get to the point where we could actually work on problem solving and solving some of the problems that we have in our society, well, we've also got to be real with ourselves, right? We've got to be willing to clear out our own vision. Anything that's impeding our own ability to see ourselves and others more clearly, which also impacts our ability to think cogently, make proper decisions, and diagnose things as they are, to be able to come up with good solutions and implement them in a way that actually will be effective. Now, I'll tell you what I struggle with the most daily. Discouragement. And that discouragement can easily morph into frustration, even despair, and anger. So, knowing that, I try to, one, call it what it is, recognize it, and ask God to show me what I can learn from those circumstances, what I'm seeing, what is going on in me and around me, and realize that, it's going to take time. And as much knowledge as we can amass, apprehended knowledge does not mean that we're wise. In fact, oftentimes the more knowledge that we amass actually blinds us more, because we assume that we know more than we actually do, and it can fuel pride. And that's why I tell you, it's okay to admit that you don't know stuff. I can tell you from my own perspective, the more that I understand, the less I know. The more that I learn, the more I realize how little I actually do know. And it's actually humbling. So that allows me to continue to learn. To realize that about myself allows me to learn even more. It is in a sense, it's a checks and balance system. Because if you realize that the more that you know, the less you actually understand, and the more you understand, the less you really know, there's always something else to learn. From yourself, from your circumstances, and from others. And that's the beginning of willingness. And willingness takes humility to realize that you need to be willing to listen to others, to observe, to learn from, to be sensitive to what's going on with them, try to understand where they're at. The old adage, put yourself in their shoes. Try to look at it from their point of view. And always be quick to give grace and slow to anger. And that's very difficult, I know, at times, with our triggered responses in our flesh and our mind and our minds in these times, particularly when you're dealing with a lot of online interactions. It's a very unnatural way of dealing with others, to have always a layer of technology. And I'm old enough to realize when we didn't have so many layers of technology. So I can tell you it was difficult to deal with people without the layers of technology and deal with oneself then. The layers, in some ways, makes it even more difficult, because it messes with your mind and makes you wonder what's real, what's not. And that creates a whole nother layer of stress and confusion. and all manner of things. But you need to know everybody is struggling with that. Everybody's dealing with that. It's okay. You don't have to know everything, and you don't have to be right on everything. You just have to be willing to learn. And if you've got something off or wrong, it's okay. If you keep learning, things will get corrected over time. If you're willing to learn, and you're willing to say, I blew it. Well, that shows a willingness to take responsibility for stuff, and also a humility to realize that, you know what, you're going to make mistakes. It's okay. That's part of growing up. Don't beat yourself up. Don't become risk averse to everything. Don't fall into the trap of thinking that you have to be perfect on everything. You just have to be willing to learn from the good, the bad, the beautiful, the ugly. You have to be willing to learn from your successes and your failures. Your failures prepare you for successes. And their successes oftentimes prepare you for even more humility when you realize that success isn't always what you think it is. And oftentimes what seems like a failure may be a lot more of a success and an opportunity to learn and grow than you might expect. It's not a formula. I know in our highly technical times, everyone's written a book, 10 steps to this, 30 steps to that, how to hack your mind, how to hack your habits, whatever, right? The truth of the matter is that life is much more dynamic and complex. There are a lot more variables. Now you can glean some valuable things from that. But life is never going to be as simple as a coded algorithm. If it was, you would hate it even more because everything would wind up being homogenized. It would be dead. In a sense, it would be more like hell. If you want a good metaphor for what life really is, look at what is alive. Look at creation. Look at nature. Look at flora and fauna. Look at the earth. Look at how the systems work. They're not machines, but there is a incredibly complex order to them and pattern to them that's beyond our ability to put into formulas. So I tell you that because I know how society right now and all its science-driven reality and computers and technology, everything feels engineered. And it works on your mind. It makes you feel like that, you have to become like it. You don't. You don't have to be a machine, even if the machines tell you differently, or even if others are acting like that is the case. God didn't make you to be a machine. Now, I feel the same thing a lot of you feel. Society feels like some kind of strange machine sometimes. The way people treat you in bureaucracies, the way they treat you in companies, the way that the cultures can develop. That's an illusion. There's a difference between having rational structure that allows things to get done and to function properly and to grow, and that of a machine. You see, part of the problem throughout all of human history is that we have tried to regain something that was lost, and because we can't really remember what it was, we're easily duped into thinking that our machines can replace it. And so we create societies that then operate like machines. We build machines to keep them going. And then over time we start seeing people as parts of the machine. We even start acting like machines. But we are not machines. We are something much more glorious, much more dynamic, much more alive, much more complex, much more beautiful than our machines. But we're surrounded by our machines. We interact with one another through machines. We work oftentimes in places that operate and treat us like machines. We drive machines to go there. We drive machines to come home. It's not that the machines are bad, it's that our thinking gets skewed, distorted, and that's what distorts everything else and makes society feel like a machine. Our reliance upon the machines also, at a subconscious level, at a spiritual level, works on us. And we start subtly being conformed to the very machines that we make. But that's not what we were created to be. Take time to look at the animals. Look at what is beautiful, what is true, what is alive, what inspires. We could mimic those things, but we can't truly create machines to replace them. Now I want you to think about that. Think about that in terms of technology. Think about all the things in society. We even talk about politics and political machines, war machines. I brought all this stuff up a number of years ago in a series of talks. But the universe is not a machine. It has mechanics. There's a pattern to it, but it's not a machine. God didn't create a giant clock, a giant machine. Again, I want to ask you to think about these things, and think about them in a deeper way, and consider them. And then think about how it is you view things, one another, how you view the world around you, how you view other peoples, tribes, tongues, and nations, how you view the problems in your life and the problems that others have. And I want you to consider the fact that we're more than machines. We don't have to become the machines we create. The machines need to serve us, not the other way around. They're tools. They're things to help facilitate life here. They aren't life here. And gaining more of them is not going to bring you more life. It's just going to take up more space surrounding you with more machines. And as it is for people, so too it is for nations. Because nations are made of people. And people are more than machines.